Is the Karate Kid Legends movie review. Guys, Karate Kid Legends movie review. As always, non-spoiler thoughts first. I'll leave a timestamp if you want to skip ahead to spoiler thoughts. I'll put them all in one video this time. And let's just get right into it. Of course, Jackie Chan is back. Ralph Macchio is back. I'm a huge fan of Cobra Kai, so if you're also a huge fan of Cobra Kai, definitely stick around for this review because I think that really, really impacts my viewing of this movie. Right off the bat, I thought this was a pretty enjoyable movie. It was really quick. I think way too quick. I think this movie actually needed more time, which is really rare for me to say. Usually I enjoy shorter movies. But I just wish it had a little bit more heart. It definitely wasn't bad. A lot of people are calling it bad, and I understand why they're saying that. It just seems a little bit shallow at times. It seems like Macchio was maybe added to this script later on. And a lot of people are saying, oh, there's no point to this movie. I disagree. I think the Karate Kid IP is clearly fresh. There was a rejuvenation with Cobra Kai. The last season was really strong. And Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio are both getting up there in age, so you're running out of time to make movies like this. So I don't think that was the problem. For me, actually, there was an outline of a really good movie. They just didn't go deep enough in really any of the storylines. I saw another article. I want to give them credit. I forgot who said it, but basically it reminded them of like how Sony treats the Spider-Man villains, but in the Karate Kid universe. And I think that's a really good interpretation, a really good opinion. Cobra Kai, I think, is a really, really incredibly strong show. I really, really loved it. Watching it, it was definitely corny, but really good. I think. The plot of this movie is definitely very similar to the first movie, with a young kid and a girl and then the girl's boyfriend and a rival team. But I think it's like the first movie, but just way weaker across the board. I think the New York City setting, and I'm from New York, I think is actually weaker than the California setting. I think the moving from China to New York, reminiscent of the Jaden Smith one, just in reverse. But I think even comparing this to the Jaden Smith movie, I thought the Jaden Smith movie, and I haven't seen it in a long time, was way just a deeper movie. Even if it wasn't amazing, I just felt like that was a deeper movie than this one. Just getting into the Chinese culture and just, I think maybe because Jackie Chan was way younger, he was able to be more physical. But even so, I just feel like that script was just way stronger. Ranking this movie compared to the other Karate Kid movies, I'd probably rank it. I mean, Karate Kid 3, it's definitely the first one, then the second one. I think it's always 1, 2. Some people like 2 better because it takes place in Japan. I guess you can say that. But I think it goes 1 is definitely first, is the best. Then 2. I think you have to put Karate Kid 3 at 3 just because it has Ralph Macchio, it has Mr. Miyagi, it has Kreese, it has Terry Silver, who's now a bigger character because of Cobra Kai. So I definitely think you have to put 3. Then I'd put the Jaden Smith one 4. Then I'd put this one. Then I'd put the Hilary Swank one. So that's probably how I'd rank them. If you ask me where I'd put Cobra Kai, I'd probably put Cobra Kai just after the first one, right? Just between 1 and 2. I think it's like some people would probably say it's even the best of the whole thing. It might honestly be, but I think Karate Kid 1 has to be first. And like I said, the movie was only 90 minutes long, so a little bit disappointing there. I think it definitely needed more time. It was really, really quick. Joshua Jackson, who of course is, who I know him as Charlie Conway from Mighty Ducks, but he has a really, really kind of strange part in this movie. I don't know, it was a little bit strange. I'll get into it in spoilers, but he was in this movie a bunch. And I guess the final thing I'll say, non-spoiler, Macchio isn't really in this movie until I'd say the later stages. Probably the last 30 minutes. Jackie Chan is in the beginning of this movie for like 5 minutes, and then he doesn't show up again until the end. So there's definitely a big chunk of this movie where Macchio and Jackie Chan weren't in the movie. And that's where Joshua Jackson kind of takes over as a mentor figure. And I didn't really love that. I don't think it made sense. I don't think they needed to get so deep into this girl's family who he has a crush on. But anyway, I'll get into that in spoilers. So that's my non-spoiler review of Karate Kid. This is your official spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so spoiler review right off the bat. I think the most important part to cover is Johnny Lawrence in this movie, and he is in the post-credit scene, which is actually a funny scene. It was like a straight out of Cobra Kai. It was good to see him. He definitely got a pop from the audience. It was a little bit frustrating not to see him in the movie, and I still think that's a big mistake, but at least they acknowledge him in the post-credit scene, and hopefully, maybe if this movie does well, we might see him in the sequel. With that being said, this movie was not a ripoff, but very similar, like a reverse to the Jaden Smith movie. Instead, this character is coming from China to New York. My biggest critique of the movie, like I said in non-spoilers, is it's just so quick. They just speed run through this movie, through this plot. There's not nearly as much emotional depth to any of these characters. Even the villain isn't nearly as, like, even cool or douchey or realistic as Johnny Lawrence. Now that I think about it, there really aren't that many school sequences, so it just doesn't really feel like a high school type of movie like the first Karate Kid movie did. It just really feels like a movie that was just kind of shot scene to scene to scene, and they just kind of made a movie. The weirdest part of this movie is this Joshua Jackson plotline, who is the father of the girl who he essentially meets when he moves to New York and gets a crush on. And he owns a pizza store, and he used to be a boxer, and now he's not a boxer. And first of all of these scenes took place in like the most obvious soap opera set ever. I don't know why. They were in New York for parts of this movie that you can tell was New York, but then in other parts of this movie was just so obviously a set. It looked so cartoonish. It looked terrible. The pizza shop, I think, looked not terrible, but just looked like so out of a sitcom, out of like Boy Meets World or one of those shows, which I like, but for like I don't even want to say a big budget movie, but a pretty big budget movie, about 50 million, I think it should look better. But this was just a strange plotline in general. He tries to teach him kung fu, and he owes money to the father of the teenage villain who's like owns a gym, but he's also kind of a mobster, and he's going to attack him. But it's also only a PG-13 movie, so it doesn't really get that dark. And I just think it's very wonky. And there's this big boxing match, which is like, I guess, one of the big plot fight scenes of this movie, where Joshua Jackson, eventually trains and gets to a fight and gets kind of like illegally injured. And it leads to this whole sequence. And I don't know, it just is weird for him to have this mentor character, because Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio are supposed to be the mentor characters. Speaking of which, they're in this movie. Ralph Macchio isn't in this movie until the very end. You can kind of tell, like, he was brought in for like a couple of days to shoot these scenes. You can just tell he's not really part of this movie. Jackie Chan is in like the beginning 5 minutes, and then also comes in kind of towards the end with Ralph Macchio. So for like a big chunk of this movie, it's, neither of them are in it. And I guess the big emotional punchline of this movie is supposed to be that his older brother, who also kind of taught him karate in China, died after winning a tournament and then getting jumped and stabbed to death. But I just didn't think any of these plot lines really worked. It's frustrating because they had a lot of good actors in this movie, and I think they actually had the outline of a really good movie. They just really needed to have deeper writing. They definitely needed more time. It should have been closer to 2 hours. It was only about an hour and a half. And so I think all those things together really hurt the movie. There really were no, speaking of Cobra Kai, there were no mentions of Cobra Kai. It doesn't get mentioned. None of the characters, nothing like that. Daniel doesn't really mention any of his family, anything that's happened in California. There's just this one scene in Mr. Miyagi's house, and that's it. There were some animated sequences which I thought were cool. I think they should have done more of this, but again, that cost money, and different flashes, which I thought were cool. I don't think, obviously, I don't think any of the training was nearly as effective. I don't think the underdog story was nearly as good. This is someone who knows Kung Fu pretty well and was just slightly outclassed, and just needed more training. If you are interested in getting to the Karate Kid universe, though, I would watch 1, 2, and 3, and then I would watch Cobra Kai. And then maybe watch this, because I guess Machio's in this. It's kind of connected, and Johnny Lawrence at the end. But I think you do a Karate Kid Legends too. I think you have it take place in California or somewhere, and I think you bring everyone into the universe. I think you bring in, well, I guess you can't bring in Terry Silver and Kreese now because spoiler alert, they died in Cobra Kai. But bring in Jaden Smith, bring in Ben Wong from this movie, Machio, Jackie Chan, just bring in everyone. Bring in the kids from Cobra Kai, who I guess are now older now, but that's what I would do. So that's my spoiler review. I thought it was not a bad movie, a little bit underwhelming, but overall, this is like a young adults movie, so it's hard to take it too seriously. Thanks, guys, for watching. Let me know your thing in the comments, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.